So, how does a painfully shy, pale kid from Manhattan, like a kid whose neighborhood nickname was literally Bobby Milk, how does he grow up to become the most terrifying, violent mobster in American cinematic history?
It is quite the pivot, yeah.
Today on the Deep Dive, our mission is to unpack this massive, incredibly chaotic, and surprisingly contradictory legacy of one of cinema's most towering figures. We're talking about Robert De Niro.
And we're looking at a profoundly expensive stack of source material today for you. The records we're pulling from include detailed biographies, his sprawling filmography, and his exhaustively updated Wikipedia files, which are current through early 2026.
Which is a lot of ground to cover.
It really is. I mean, this covers a trajectory that starts in the bohemian enclaves of 1940s New York, and it stretches all the way to him standing on stage to receive the honorary Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival in May of 2025.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if we just look at the bullet points here, it honestly doesn't make logical sense.
No, it really doesn't.
You have a guy known for playing these hyper-masculine, explosive sociopaths, right? Who then completely pivots to playing a hilariously neurotic, comedic father-in-law, all while simultaneously building this massive global hospitality empire.
And, you know, still making global headlines.
Exactly. Having his 7th child at the age of 79, I mean, it is a staggering life to try and summarize for you guys today.
It reads less like one biography and more like 3 or 4 distinct lifetimes just crammed into a single existence.
For sure.
To really understand the mechanics of how he operates today, the sources force us to look closely at the environment that forged him. We have to go back to 1943, to a very specific kind of unconventional household in Greenwich Village.
His parents were both painters, right?
They were, yeah. Virginia Admiral and Robert De Niro Sr. met in a painting class, but this wasn't your standard mid-century nuclear family.
Not at all.
They separated when De Niro was just 2 years old because his father actually announced he was gay. Right. And in the mid-1940s, that was a profoundly complex dynamic to navigate, both socially and personally. So De Niro was raised primarily by his mother in Greenwich Village in Little Italy, though his father did remain a close fixture in his life.
And from what I'm reading in these notes, the ideological whiplash he experienced as a kid was just intense.
Oh, the contrasts are fascinating. I mean, his mother had been raised Presbyterian but became a staunch atheist.
Okay.
And his father was a lapsed Catholic who had abandoned the church at age 12. So De Niro's day-to-day life was rooted in this secular, bohemian, artistic reality.
Right.
But then while he was staying with his grandparents during his parents' divorce, they completely disregarded his parents' wishes and secretly baptized him into the Catholic Church.
Wait, really? Secretly baptized?
Yeah, completely under the radar.
So before he even starts grade school, he is essentially living this double life. And out on the streets of Little Italy, he's incredibly withdrawn, right? He befriends the local street kids, but he is so pale and so quiet that they give him the nickname Bobby Milk.
Bobby Milk, yeah.
It just feels like such a massive leap from Bobby Milk to a career in public performance. The sources say he dropped out of high school at 16 to pursue acting, but the reasoning is so remarkably cynical for a teenager.
It really reveals a lot about his baseline psychology. He was reportedly watching a television show, just observing the actors on screen, and he concluded that if these people were managing to make a living at it despite not being very good, well, he couldn't possibly do any worse.
That is hilarious.
Right. So he drops out and finds his way to the Stella Adler Conservatory and Lee Strasberg's Actors Studio, which is where he collides with the Stanislavski system.
Which is what we casually call method acting.
Exactly.
So here is my working theory on this, looking at his early life. For De Niro, acting wasn't just an artistic pursuit, it was an armored suit.
Oh, I like that.
Right. Like if you were this painfully shy kid, stepping into the Stanislavski method is a psychological tool. It gives you a way to safely explore a chaotic world by, wearing someone else's skin.
That makes a lot of sense.
I mean, think about it. Have you ever put on a literal uniform at work or adopted a highly formal professional persona for a presentation just to project a certainty you don't actually feel inside? That is exactly what De Niro was doing, just on a historic cinematic scale.
That framing really explains the underlying mechanism of why the Stanislavski method was the exact tool he needed. The technique isn't just about pretending, right?
Right.
It requires an actor to draw upon their own deeply buried inner emotions, their own traumas, and their own memories to construct a character's reality.
So he's using all that childhood chaos.
Exactly. bridging the gap between his complex childhood, the secret baptisms, the fractured family, the tough streets of Little Italy, and the explosive characters he would play. Well, that required a rigid framework. The method gave him permission to channel his intense inner life into a vessel that was entirely safe, specifically because it was fictional.
But as the timeline moves into the 1970s and 80s, that armor stops being purely emotional, right? It becomes aggressively, shockingly physical.
Oh, completely.
The pursuit of the perfect performance becomes something else entirely. It's no longer just about channeling childhood memories. He becomes an architect of extreme physical metamorphosis.
And the level of dedication he introduces to American cinema was practically unprecedented. The sources point to 1973's Mean Streets, with director Martin Scorsese as, like, the starting gun.
Okay, yep.
He plays Johnny Boy, this reckless, self-destructive, small-time criminal. And to maintain the chaotic psychology of the character, he intentionally isolated himself from the rest of the cast and crew. He just refused to break the illusion.
And the escalation from there is rapid.
Very rapid. The very next year, 1974, he lands the role of young Vito Corleone in Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather Part 2. And he doesn't just read the lines with an accent.
No, of course not.
He travels to Sicily. He immerses himself to the point of learning multiple regional Sicilian dialects, fundamentally altering his speech patterns.
Which is wild.
It is. And it earns him the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, making cinematic history, as he and Marlon Brando become the first two actors to win Oscars for playing the exact same character.
Which is incredible, but it's the preparation for 1976's Taxi Driver that really caught my eye.
Oh, Travis Bickle.
Yeah. He plays Travis Bickle, this lonely taxi driver descending into violent madness. To build this character, he loses 30 pounds. He spends time at a U.S. Army base just to study and absorb Midwestern mannerisms. He acquires a legitimate cab license and actually drives a taxi around New York City.
He really put in the hours.
And he famously improvises the "you talking to me" mirror sequence. Then the next year, for the 1977 film New York, New York, he decides he can't just fake playing the saxophone for the cameras.
So he actually learns to play the instrument.
Yes, and all of that is merely a prelude to 1980's Raging Bull. To play middleweight boxer Jake LaMotta, he literally learns how to box to a professional standard.
And wins the Oscar for Best Actor for that role.
Right. But then, to portray the older, out-of-shape version of LaMotta, he embarks on this punishing eating binge across Europe and gains 60 pounds. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because I have to push back a bit on how Hollywood romanticizes this era.
How do you mean?
Well, we talk about gaining 60 pounds or driving a cab as dedication, but look at the biological and psychological toll. At what point does preparation cross the line into a dangerous obsession?
That is a very valid question.
It is like an Olympic athlete who is willing to permanently destroy their joints or risk their cardiovascular health for one single gold medal. I mean, Scorsese actually had to halt production on Raging Bull because he was terrified by De Niro's labored breathing.
Wow.
Is this brilliant art, or is this just a man slowly destroying himself on camera?
It forces us to question the boundaries of self-preservation in art, for sure. But looking at the ripple effect of those choices, De Niro was fundamentally rewriting audience expectations. Before this era, audiences accepted a distinct layer of theatricality in film acting. You always knew you were watching an actor. But De Niro discarded that.
He erased the line.
He did. He didn't just put on a mask. He essentially rewrote his own source code for every role. By blurring the line between documentary reality and cinematic fiction, he set an incredibly punishing standard.
He really did.
The intense, immersive actors of the modern era, you know, your Daniel Day-Lewis's, your Christian Bales, they are all walking through a door that Robert De Niro kicked open.
So he builds this towering, deeply intimidating legacy. He is Vito Corleone, he is Jake LaMotta, he is Travis Bickle. But when you have pushed dramatic, hypermasculine, violent characters to their absolute physical and psychological limits, you literally have nowhere left to go in that direction without killing yourself.
Exactly.
So what is the survival mechanism there?
You subvert the monster you've created. You take the terrifying cultural cachet you've spent 2 decades building, and you weaponize it for laughs. He pivots to comedy.
And it is a massive, lucrative pivot.
Huge. We see the early mechanics of it in 1988's Midnight Run, which is a brilliant buddy cop dynamic. Then in 1999, he tests the waters of self-parody in Day Run, Analyze This, playing an insecure mob boss requiring a therapist.
A classic.
But the absolute juggernaut arrives in 2000 with Meet the Parents. He plays Jack Burns, the terrifying ex-CIA father-in-law. The film grosses $330 million worldwide and becomes a cultural touchstone.
It really was everywhere.
It was. But the source material notes that this era is also where the critical narrative sours.
Ah, the infamous slump narrative.
Right. Film critics throughout the 2000s and 2010s began arguing loudly that he had lost his edge. They pointed to a string of critically panned projects. The 2004 thriller Godsend, for instance, holds a 4% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Ouch. 4%.
Yeah, and they pointed to sequels like Little Fockers or the heavily criticized 2016 comedy Dirty Grandpa. The pervasive critical consensus was that the greatest actor of the 20th century was now just sleepwalking through terrible scripts strictly to collect a paycheck.
You have to challenge the critics on this one. They are sitting there mourning the loss of the intense, self-destructive 1970s De Niro. But look at the actual mechanism of what he is doing here. He's making hundreds of millions of dollars doing comedies where he basically just gets to wink at his own mafia legacy.
Right.
He doesn't have to risk his cardiovascular health or learn Sicilian. He just has to look at Ben Stiller and point two fingers at his own eyes.
Yeah.
Is that a slump? Or is that just brilliant, low-stress brand monetization by a guy who already proved he's the best in the world?
The mechanism of those comedies is exactly why they are so lucrative. A role like Jack Burns only functions because of the 20 years of Oscar-winning dramatic groundwork he laid beforehand.
That makes total sense.
The comedy doesn't come from the script alone. It comes from the audience's residual, deep-seated fear of Jake LaMotta.
Yes.
If a traditional comedic actor played that father-in-law, it wouldn't be funny.
Yeah.
It is funny entirely because we, the audience, look at the screen and actually believe Robert De Niro is capable of waterboarding Ben Stiller in his basement.
Exactly. We're laughing as a defense mechanism because we're secretly terrified of him. It's genius. But while the film critics were busy debating whether his legacy was tarnished by Dirty Grandpa, the source material shows De Niro was entirely unbothered.
Completely unbothered.
Why? Because he was incredibly busy building a massive real-world empire. His off-screen life is as complex and high stakes as any script he ever read.
The sheer volume of his off-screen ventures is staggering. On the business front, he co-founded Tribeca Productions in 1989. Following the September 11 attacks, he and his partners founded the Tribeca Film Festival to help economically and culturally revitalize Lower Manhattan.
Which was huge for the city.
And it has since grown into a massive global entity. Simultaneously, he was building a hospitality empire. He co-owns the Nobu brand with chef Nobu Matsuhisa, which encompasses luxury restaurants and hotels across the globe, from Las Vegas to Manila.
But operating at that scale invites massive friction, right? The legal and financial realities detailed in these sources sound incredibly stressful.
The legal battles are dense. For example, he was sued by the accountants of the trust that owns his own Gardner estate over a property tax dispute. The accountants filed the suit, citing fiduciary duty.
Let's clarify what that means in this context for you guys, because it sounds absurd that his own team would sue him.
It does sound crazy, but fiduciary duty means those accountants had a strict legal obligation to protect the financial assets of the trust above all else, even if it meant going to court against De Niro himself to prevent a financial misstep.
Wow.
He reportedly went bananas when he read about his own trust suing him in the paper and quickly settled the matter.
I bet. And then there's the lawsuit from 2019, which honestly sounds like a rejected comedy script.
Oh, this one?
His production company sued a former employee for $6 million, alleging she breached her duties, misused corporate funds, and I literally cannot get over binge-watched 55 episodes of the show Friends in 4 days while on the company clock.
It was highly publicized, but it was a bitter, exhausting legal fight. The employee countersued for harassment and gender discrimination. Oh, wow.
And by 2023, a jury found De Niro not personally liable for the discrimination, but his company was ordered to pay the former employee $1.2 million in damages. If you think about your own career, imagine reaching your late 70s, a time when most people are prioritizing rest and retirement. And instead, you are dealing with multi-million-dollar corporate lawsuits and running a global hotel brand.
It's exhausting just to think about.
And the stress bleeds heavily into his personal life. He has 7 children across multiple relationships. During a 2021 virtual divorce hearing, during his split from his second wife, Grace Hightower, De Niro's own lawyer argued in court that the actor was working at an unsustainable pace just to support his estranged wife and pay off massive back taxes.
That phrase right there, unsustainable pace, recontextualizes the entire slump narrative we discussed earlier.
It really does.
De Niro's obsessive drive didn't vanish in the 2000s. It just migrated. It moved from his acting preparation into managing real estate, funding a sprawling family structure and navigating complex divorces. He wasn't losing his artistic edge. He was simply operating a massive financial machine that required constant fuel.
The machine had to keep running?
Exactly. And life continued to bring intense personal developments. In April 2023, at the age of 79, he welcomed his seventh child, a daughter named Gia, making him one of the oldest fathers on record.
79 years old.
Right. Yet just months later, in July 2023, he endured a profound tragedy when his 19-year-old grandson, Leandro, died from an accidental fentanyl overdose.
The velocity of his life is just hard to comprehend. And amidst the acting, the empire, the lawsuits, and the profound family tragedy, he is also heavily engaged in the political and cultural sphere.
Very heavily.
Looking at the records of his public life, he is undeniably polarizing. The sources detail his fierce political advocacy, including prominently backing the campaigns of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Conversely, he has been a highly vocal, uncompromising critic of Donald Trump, frequently comparing his politics to fascism.
And looking impartially at the records, that level of outspoken advocacy generated severe, real-world consequences.
Yes, it did.
In October 2018, De Niro was one of several high-profile political figures targeted by an explosive device sent through the mail to his Tribeca grill.
Terrifying.
And more recently, in 2024, the National Association of Broadcasters actually withdrew a prestigious leadership award they had planned to give him.
Really?
Yes, explicitly citing his highly publicized vocal criticisms outside of Donald Trump's criminal trial in New York.
The sources also highlight a major collision between his personal life and public health discourse back in 2016. De Niro initially defended the inclusion of a documentary called Vaxxed at the Tribeca Film Festival. The film was directed by a discredited anti-vaccine activist. De Niro explained at the time that his interest wasn't inherently political, but stemmed from his own personal experience raising his autistic son, Elliot.
But the pushback from the medical and scientific communities was immense and immediate, citing the fraudulent nature of the claims linking vaccines to autism.
It was a huge controversy.
Facing that intense scientific pressure, De Niro consulted with experts and festival organizers and ultimately withdrew the film from the schedule. However, he later stated on television that while he wasn't strictly anti-vaccination, he still felt people should see the film and question vaccine efficacy. It remains a highly scrutinized chapter of his public life.
So, you have a man who is living out loud, constantly in the crosshairs of cultural, political, and financial battles. But just when the critics thought they had him entirely figured out, just when they assumed he was only stepping onto movie sets to fund the Nobu Empire or pay his taxes, he steps back into the ring with the masters.
He really does.
The modern era of his career brings a stunning resurgence.
He forcefully reminds the industry of his capabilities. We see the beginnings of this in his collaborations with director David O. Russell, particularly his deeply grounded emotional performance in 2012's Silver Linings Playbook, which earned him an Oscar nomination.
Such a good performance.
And he also takes a crucial supporting role in Todd Phillips' 2019 cultural phenomenon, Joker.
But the real magic, like the reunion that cinephiles had been waiting decades for, was the grand return to Martin Scorsese.
Yes. In 2019, they reunite for the sprawling epic The Irishman, their first feature collaboration since 1995. And then, in 2023, he delivers what many consider a late-career masterclass as the chilling, manipulative William King Hale in Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon.
Oh, he was so unsettling in that.
And that performance earns him yet another Academy Award nomination.
He also proves he can adapt to the shifting industry landscape, right? Moving seamlessly into the streaming era by starring in the 2025 Netflix political thriller series 0 Day. And all of this culminates in a massive crowning achievement. In May of 2025, he is awarded the honorary Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, celebrating over 5 decades of cinema history.
So what does this all mean?
It's a great question.
When you look at this late-career resurgence, from The Irishman to Cannes, do you think this is a conscious, planned victory lap? Or is it simply that he only truly exerts effort when a director actually demands greatness from him?
I think it suggests that his talent is not a fading commodity. It is a switch that he can still flip when the material warrants it.
Switch, yeah.
When he is paired with a filmmaker who truly challenges him, someone like Scorsese who demands the absolute uncomfortable truth of a scene, that old Bobby Milk dedication instantly returns.
The armor goes back on.
The armor goes back on. Consider the scope of what he has achieved. He had successfully navigated the gritty, independent cinema of the 1970s, the blockbuster comedies of the 2000s, and the prestige streaming wars of the 2020s. Most actors do not survive one of those industry transitions, let alone three. It is an unparalleled run. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive today. We have journeyed from a shy, pale kid in Greenwich Village who used method acting as psychological armor, to a man who violently rewrote his own source code on screen, to a comedic icon winking at his own terrifying shadow.
It's quite a journey.
We've seen him navigate the relentless stress of global business, complex lawsuits, and profound personal tragedy, only to re-emerge as an enduring cinematic titan.
The sheer endurance is the takeaway here. If you are listening to this and thinking about your own trajectory, De Niro's story proves that reinventing yourself does not require erasing your past.
Right?
Whether he was playing a comedic father-in-law or building a real estate empire, he consistently used his past, his intense reputation, his history, as leverage for his next act. Every era funded or informed the next.
Leverage your past, don't run from it. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final lingering thought. We talked early on about how he built this armor, how he wore the skins of these intense, often violent men as a way to safely interact with the world.
Yeah.
When a human being spends 60 years aggressively adopting the psychologies, the physicalities, and the absolute darkest impulses of hundreds of different people, at what point does the character end and the real person begin?
That is the million-dollar question.
After a lifetime of housing the minds of Travis Bickle and Jake LaMotta and Vito Corleone, is there even a boundary left? Or does the actor just eventually become a human mosaic of everyone they've ever pretended to be? Keep digging, keep questioning, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.